Is it true that if I take a statin, it only adds 3 days to my life? I've seen this question in the comments many, many times. So this idea comes from an analysis that's been shared widely on social media, where they estimated that what they call the postponement of death for people taking a statin is in the order of 3 to 4 days. Now, a few years later, same team published an update, larger analysis where they said, oh, it's not 3 to 4 days anymore. It's 8 to 17 days after all. So it all sounds a little disappointing, right? You have to take a pill every day for the rest of your life to get what? Like a week or two extra in the end? It sounds a little meh. But what are these analyses actually measuring? Because I've seen people throw these numbers around on social media many times. At 3 days, at the 4 days. I've never seen anyone explain what they actually did. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, how do scientists study statins? Well, they take a large group of people, usually thousands, with high cholesterol, with high risk of heart disease. They split them randomly into 2 groups. They give a statin to only one of those groups. Then they follow those people for years. And they keep track of how many people have heart attacks or strokes or die in each of the 2 groups, getting the statin versus not getting the statin. So this is what we call a statin trial. So in these analyses that we're talking about today, the scientists were specifically interested in death. So they measured how long each participant survived over the course of the statin trial, and then they averaged everybody. So average of everybody taking the statin, that group that receives the statin, average of everybody that's not taking the statin, the control group. But here's the thing to understand. Statin trials last about 5 years, average. And so the vast majority of the participants, about 90%, give or take, don't die during the trial. Both the participants receiving the statin and the participants not receiving the statin, the vast majority survive the full 5 years of the trial. They're still alive by the end. And so for all of those people, the postponement of death is effectively 0, because you can't postpone the death of somebody that didn't die during the window of observation. So yeah, if we lump in everybody, including that vast majority that didn't die, the difference between the 2 groups is very small in terms of how long they lived. Most people in both groups are still alive by the end of the trial. In other words, over the 5 years that the analysis covers, most people getting statins survive 5 years. Most people not getting statins survive 5 years. So the average for both groups is very similar. So this tells us very little about the effect of statins on death. The participants could end up dying many years apart or not. We don't know because the trial only covers 5 years. It ends before most participants die. This is like taking a group of smokers and a group of non-smokers, following them for a few years. Most people are still alive in both groups, haven't died yet. Does that mean smoking is fine? It's not worth trying to quit? Of course not. I didn't wait for them to die, right? There could be a massive difference in lifespan by the end when they do end up dying. There could be a difference of 20 years between the groups for all I know. So the problem is not the analysis. The analysis is fine. It measures what it measures, as long as we understand it, right? The problem are the hot takes on social media. People will say random stuff and repeat things they heard, often without understanding it, without knowing what these studies are actually measuring. So you have to keep your guard up. There's no other way. Okay, how do I know that I understand it? What, nobody gets the analysis, but I'm the genius that just gets it? No. I had colleagues who were statisticians go over this analysis to double check that I wasn't confused. Then I contacted the authors of these analyses. 2 authors contacted independently to triple check. Both authors confirmed independently that my understanding of the analysis was essentially what they did. I got the gist of it. So at that point, I was comfortable making content and telling you guys about it. Do I think I deserve a medal for doing this? Absolutely not. I think this is bare minimum. I think it's crazy that people don't do this by default when talking about things that are life and death. But the reality is the vast majority of people on social media are not going to go to the trouble because 1, it's work, and 2, it's not incentivized. It's actually de-incentivized. The more substance you try to inject into your content, the less popular it gets. That's the reality. What's incentivized very strongly on social media are superficial takes that sound contrarian and have no substance. It's very important to understand this. And so you just have to protect yourself and keep your guard up. Like I said, there's no other way. Okay, so how can we get a better estimate of this effect of statins on death? Well, one thing we can do is we can look only at those participants who did die during the trial, right? That small minority. So only the participants who died in the statin group and only the participants who died not getting the statin. And did one of these die later? So they've done this type of analysis for a statin trial called 4S. And when we look only at the participants who died during the trial, by the end of the trial, by the end of those 5 years, give or take, of follow-up, the postponement of death was 1 year for the group taking the statin. So they were dying, in average, 1 year after the folks not receiving the statin. Okay, interesting result. Now, it's an analysis of one trial, so grain of salt. Also, we're still looking at this narrow 5-year window, right? And most people are going to live longer than that. In fact, the authors of the famous 3-day analysis, they acknowledge all of this in the text of the analysis itself. We only estimated the survival gain achieved within the trial's running time. Whereas in real life, right, treatment is often continued much longer. It's right there in the text if we actually go through it. So we need another method that can estimate this long-term effect of statins. We can't do a randomized trial for 20 years. It's just not possible for many reasons, but one of them being ethics. Once you see a statistically significant benefit of a treatment, you are ethically obligated to halt the trial and offer the treatment to the folks in the control group. You can't keep them in the dark and let them keep having heart attacks and strokes and dying when some of those events could have been avoided once you have scientific evidence that the treatment works. It's just not ethical. So the 20-year-long randomized trial is just never going to happen. So scientists have tried to estimate this effect using different methods. One method is to take the results of the trial during that 5-year window and extrapolating over time. See what that looks like over 10 years or 20 years, sort of like simulating a 20-year-long trial. So one analysis did this, and they found that if the results of the 5 years continued over time, somewhere between 2.8 and 9.9 extra years of life would be gained on the statin if the treatment were continued lifelong. Okay, interesting result. Some limitations with that method as well, like any method ever. So scientists used a third method. They studied populations that resembled the participants of the statin trials. Similar age, similar cholesterol level, all these characteristics, and matching them to the participants getting the statins and to the participants not getting the statins, and then measuring how long these populations live. Several analyses have done this. The estimates range from 3 months to 2.5 extra years of life added on the statin. Okay, why are these numbers all over the place? Are scientists flipping coins or what's going on? Well, it depends on the specifics. This actually makes total sense. So for example, age. How old is the individual when you intervene? Right? Let's say that I have a risk factor that's out of whack. Let's say my blood pressure is really high. If I fix that at 40, I'm going to get a much larger benefit lifelong than if I wait till I'm 80 to rectify my risk factor. Makes total sense, right? It's the same thing for cholesterol. Also, how high is the risk factor to begin with? If my blood pressure is sky high, I'm going to benefit more by improving it than if it's just marginally high. How much do I lower it? If I just lower it a smidge, small benefit. If I bring it down all the way to the healthy range, bigger benefit. This is all kind of intuitive. All these risk factors work the same way. Cholesterol is no exception. There's more variables, but you get the idea. If I just say statin, what's the benefit for statin? It's a meaningless question, right? What dose of statin? Started at what age? How high was the cholesterol and the ApoB of this person when they started? What was the lipid value on treatment? How long was the treatment for, right? These aren't trivial details. This completely changes the estimate. It makes a massive difference. In general, the higher my risk factor and the higher my overall risk, the more I stand to gain. So for example, the 9.9 years estimate, that's the longest one that I've seen. That's for people who have heart disease diagnosed. So they have very high risk at baseline. They also had very high cholesterol, 188 milligrams per deciliter average LDL cholesterol. Normal is like under 100, and their blood pressure wasn't great either. So they had very high risk at baseline. That's why the benefit is large. People with lower risk would stand to gain less. Just to reiterate again, this time element, because it's so crucial. How long you keep the risk factor under control or how long you are exposed to the risk factor. So one analysis looked exactly at this factor of time. They had two scenarios: statin treatment for 5 years versus lifelong. And the estimates were 3 to 4 months added to life for the shorter treatment and 2 to 2.4 years for lifelong treatment. So here's that difference again: short-term, long-term. This is huge for chronic disease, for all of these risk factors. Yeah, it matters how high your risk factor is, the blood pressure or the glucose or the cholesterol or the ApoB. That matters, but time of exposure matters much more. Okay, so we've looked at 3 different methods to estimate this effect of statins. There's a 4th method, and this is good. This is how you always want to proceed in science because, like we said, no method is perfect. So you want to ask the question in different ways, and this gives you an idea of ballpark. So we can use genetics. People with different genetic variants, inherited naturally, including genetic variants in the target of statins, the protein that statins target, and then we look at how long those people live. So with genetics, we're truly looking at long-term exposure, right? It's lifelong, from birth to death. So one of these genetic studies reports a 2-year difference in length of life for each 24 points of ApoB. So ApoB is just a more robust metric of risk of heart disease than LDL cholesterol. And ApoB is also lowered by statins. So 24 points going from, say, 80 milligrams per deciliter to 104. This difference, if maintained lifelong, would correspond to roughly a 2-year shorter life. And the authors explain the real effect is probably even larger. These results are probably an underestimate. Now, there's a 5th method to look at this. I promise this one is the last. Because one weakness of the methods we've looked at so far is they're not really looking at people on statins for a long period of time. They're extrapolating or they're using surrogates. It's not the same thing. So we want to actually look at human beings taking statins for a long period of time, for decades if possible, and see what happens there. So like I mentioned, after a statin trial ends, those 5 years give or take, the control group that wasn't getting the statin during the trial are usually offered the possibility of taking the medication. And so scientists will often continue to follow the participants long after the trial is over, precisely to get a sense of the long-term effect of statins. And so for some of these trials that were the first, that took place in the 90s, we have follow-ups now of up to 20 years, 5 years of the trial itself, and then 15 years of post-trial follow-up. And so basically the folks who received a statin during the trial and continued on the statin after the trial have taken them for a total of 20 years. And the folks who were in the control group, so did not get a statin during the trial, but chose to start one after the trial, they've been on treatment for less time because they started with a 5-year delay, right? So the bottom line is that these analyses report a benefit for the folks who started the statins earlier, including lower risk of death, lower all-cause mortality. So this is called the legacy effect. This effect that's still measurable years down the line of having started the statins earlier. And so when they asked, okay, in practice, what does this amount to? The number they came up with was 5 months added to life on the folks that started the statins earlier. And these were the same authors, by the way, that published the 3-day analysis. They also carried out this analysis and came up with these numbers for this scenario. So this is in the ballpark of what we've seen before, right? 5-year-long treatment corresponding to a few months of added life, lifelong treatment being more in the range of years, depending on specifics. So this legacy effect provides some reassurance that there's nothing odd going on long-term. The net effect is still positive. Lower risk of dying. Now, quick word on individual susceptibility. This always comes up because we all know a case of somebody who smoked their whole lives but never had lung cancer, or we have a grandfather who had very high cholesterol, didn't have a heart attack. So all risk factors work like this. For all of these risk factors, some people get away with exposure and some don't. So anytime you're looking at these estimates, these numbers, it's always the average for a population. If we have 2 groups of people, one of them has much higher blood pressure, for example, over time, we're going to see more disease in those folks, everything else held equal. In average, in that group, there's going to be more disease, but individually, at individual level, some people in that group are going to get away with the risk factor, and some are going to suffer the brunt of the risk factor. That's always the way it is for all of these risk factors. So to summarize everything we've talked about, the 3-day estimate or the 8 to 17-day estimate is for the 5-year window of the trial, not beyond that. And it's lumping in all the participants, including the ones that didn't die, which are usually the vast majority, 90% or so, that couldn't have their death postponed. When we look at long-term, the estimates are months to years of life added, depending on the specifics. The higher my risk factor, the more I stand to gain by handling it. The earlier in life I handle it, the better, the more I stand to gain, etc. At the end of the day, this is always going to be a topic with a lot of subjectivity, because for some people, a week or 2 weeks extra of life added might be great. They might gladly take that. For other people, several years might be no big deal. So this depends on perspective. So it's always going to be an informed decision for you to make with your clinician. My thing is, we can't make informed decisions if we don't have quality information in our hands. And unfortunately, as a whole, social media is not providing us with that. A common question is side effects of statins. We took a look at diabetes and statins in this previous video right here. And here's one that goes over muscle pains, dementia, a lot of other frequently asked questions. Check those out. I'll meet you over there. Take care.